I'm backing up my truck, I'm gonna hook it up, loading up my boat with all my gear. I've been working hard all week, trying to make ends meet, spending time wishing I was fishing. Well, Terry Wickstrom wants to take you fishing. Gather up your gear and come along. Well, Terry Wickstrom wants to take you fishing.
This is Terry Wickstrom. Join Karen Cullum, Greg Plaggio, and me as we take you to some of our favorite fishing spots from Colorado to Minnesota, the Arctic Circle to Central America and beyond. As we revisit episodes of Mountain States Fishing and Angling Adventures Television on the best of fishing with Terry Wickstrom.
You know, one of the great things about little ponds like this, and there's ponds like this all over, wherever you live in the United States, you're watching this show, there's some kind of a pond, whether it has stock trout, bluegills, crappies, catfish, bullheads in it. And these are just awesome places to take kids. Like where I live here in Colorado, the Division of Wildlife puts out a book called Fishing Close to Home. And it actually lists all these little ponds and little rivers and little lakes in the area. This is a couple miles from my home. We're surrounded by houses. We're in a little park. This is one you could send your kids to. They could take a bobber and a rod and come by themselves if they're a little older. If they're younger, take them down here yourself. But it's the kind of place you can come a couple hours after work, a Saturday afternoon, and you know, probably you're not going to catch big fish. This particular pond, one of these two, I'm not sure, there's two little ponds here, at one time produced about a 9-pound catfish. So every now and then a big bass or a big catfish will get in one of these ponds. And the other thing too is it's such basic, easy fishing that you can fish it almost any way you want. You can take fish on a night crawler with a bobber. You could take a night crawler or something and let it sit on the bottom. You could take a little rough plastic minnow like this Berkeley Power minnow, or a little jig like you could use here. And it is a little bit of stealth fishing. You got to be a little bit sneaky, because these fish see a lot of people and they get pressured. But there's lots of them in here. I can see tons of bluegills out here. They're getting ready to spawn. So they're a little wary right now. But we just got to get the right lure in front of the right one. And it doesn't have to be complicated fishing. There we go. You know, crappie. Look at the nice crappie. And this is a little pond, like I was saying earlier, that's just a mile or two from my house. You could walk over here, bike over here. We're surrounded by houses. And look at that, nice, that's a nice eating size crappie. We could get a bunch of those. We're gonna let it go. You know, I'm not a big believer in harvesting a lot of fish out of these ponds. It's okay to take a couple, especially the little bluegills that get so prolific. But one of the reasons I don't harvest a lot out of these ponds is because they do, you could decimate these ponds in a hurry. I just want to come down and have some fun and catch some fish. Let me show you real quick what I caught that on. I'll show you the package later. This is just a little Berkeley Power minnow, 2-inch Power minnow. And I've got a little tiny Eagle Claw red hook in there, sticking out so they can hit it. I'm just twitching it in the water with no weight, just making it almost look alive. And what's happening right now, these crappies are probably trying to spawn. They may be looking at that minnow as something to eat, or they may be looking at it as something that's invading its spawning area. Now that minnow is going to sink really slow and just kind of twitch around like it's alive. That's all I want. We're just give it a little twitch, bring it in. Give it a little twitch, bring it in. I'm trying to cast over by these bushes because I think if there's any spawning crappies or bass in here, they're going to be over where it's hard to get at, where they're protected by those bushes. Panfish, another panfish, little bluegill. Switched over just to show a different presentation to a little bobber, a little clip-on bobber, little tiny piece of worm, and got a bluegill on it. So we've caught crappies on a little plastic minnow and bluegills on a piece of nightcrawler, a tiny piece of nightcrawler. Let me show you how we rig this real quick. I've got my night crawlers over there on the table. Let him go, and away he goes. What a great way to take kids fishing. I'm gonna get a little piece of night crawler. I'm gonna show you exactly how I rig this. All I do is I take a night crawler and I'll take one out and cover these up so we don't get them all dried out. As you can see, I have a little clip-on spring bobber. Then I have a little red eagle claw hook that's just a foot or two. Now you'll change this depth depending on how deep the water is and how deep the bluegills or panfish are. And all I want is a little tiny piece of a night crawler on there. Maybe a third at the most. This is almost too big, but we'll go with it because there's some bigger fish in here too. We might catch one. So all I have is that now. I just have a little clip-on bobber with that. And like I said, we could change the depth, but this is real shallow where we're fishing. The reason I have it unweighted is the weight of that worm won't pull this bobber down and make it stand straight up. If you had a weight on here, this bobber would float in the water like that because that weight would pull the end of the bobber down. Because I don't have any weight, these fish are small, that bobber lays there, and then when the fish bites it, then it starts to tip up, and you can tell a real bite from a little fish like that. Makes it real easy, especially for kids to tell, and it's just great. So we'll get this back out there, and we'll just kind of wait. And all we do now is sit and wait, and you see how that bobber is laying there flat. And if we get a bite, that bobber will tip right up, and we'll know we'll be able to see it real easy. There's hundreds of bluegills here. Looks like they're trying to mate. They're spawning. There he goes. Got him. I'll tell you what was happening here, folks. I got to explain this to you. It's really funny. I was talking how all the little bluegills we're seeing out here were eating off the surface, and I have a fly rod with me, but I didn't want to rig it up. Another nice little bluegill, probably a green sunfish really. So I took this bobber off. Had this bobber on there, took it off, and all I have now is this hook and a line. No weight, no bobber, no nothing, because they're feeding off the surface. And I'm putting a piece of night crawler on it, maybe an inch and a half long, and just hooking it through the hook real easy. Now you can't cast this very far because we don't have any weight, but these fish are all within 10 feet of shore. So all I have to do now is just kind of get this little bit of tangle in there. All I got to do now is just kind of whip this out there. You see, I didn't make a very long cast there. Had some slack in the line. We'll get that out. One of the things with this no weight, you will tend to get a little slack sometimes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work that little night crawler right along by the surface because it's not going to sink very much. And I can just drag it right through them, and I can see it up on top. And they chase it. And as it sinks, they go after it. There he goes after it. Did he get it? Nope, he missed it that time. But I can see him going after it. There we go. Ooh, this feels like a bit better fish. I don't know what we got here, but it feels bigger than what we've been catching. This is a bigger fish. I don't know what we're hooked. This shows you, folks, you fish these ponds, you never know, because they stock some of them with trout. There's catfish and bass in some of them. This is not just a typical little pond fish. This is oh. Yeah, I don't know if what I got here yet, if it's a catfish or a trout. Looks like it might be it's a sucker. But that's okay. Think of the fun you can have catching these fish here. Look at that. Night crawler under a bobber, fishing for bluegills, a little pond. Now this might not be the most sought after fish in the world, but just imagine when you take your kids down here and they hook into something like that. A mile from your house, a little pond. We've caught a crappie. We've caught several bluegills, big sucker in here, and put up a good fight on ultralight rods. Let's put that back. And away he goes. And let me show you what we're using for gear. You know, talked a little bit about the lures we're using and stuff before, but one of the things we didn't tell you about the rod and reel. You know, if somebody was going to buy a rod and reel to fish, say in a state like Colorado or Minnesota or anywhere you might be watching this, your first rod and reel, probably I tell you get a medium light spinning rod with 6 or 8 pound test on it, and that's going to cover about 80% of the fishing situations if you can only have one rod and reel. But if you're going to fish these ponds, go get an ultralight setup. Get one for your kids too. But if you're going to fish these ponds, or you're going to do a lot of fishing of ponds, I've got a little Fluger President. It's their ultralight, and just a great little reel. And I've got 4 pound test Berkley Fireline on here, and Fireline Crystal. And the reason for that setup is one, the Fireline is going to cast these light lures we're using really well. Even this little minnow we have here on this rod, I can cast it a mile on that little Berkley Fireline. And I don't have to worry as much about memory and line twist with the Fireline, especially if the kids are using it. Yet I get a real fine diameter line that'll cast light lures. But an ultralight rod with light line and a small reel, it's going to make all this so much more fun. So if you're catching, whether you're catching a bluegill or a crappie or a big sucker like we just had, it's not going to matter. And we fished with 2 different lures today so far. We've had a night crawler on a hook, and we've had a little 2-inch Berkley power worm, and that's all we've done. And you know, you come on a bike or you walk, you can take a little pack, a little fanny pack, and carry all the tackle you need for the entire day's fishing. You know, another thing when you're fishing these small ponds, sometimes you have to move a little bit because you'll beat an area up. You know, they get pressured, the fish get a little smart. So don't be afraid to fish in an area, move down the shore a little bit, and then move back to where you were a little later after you've rested a little bit. Fish have to eat, even if they're pressured all the time. And in a pond like this, you can cover the whole pond, and you know, by moving, you never know when you're going to hook into that one great big bass or crappie. Like, and look for little things, like we have a stick in the water here. I'm not going to get too close to it, but I'm going to throw my little plastic Berkley Power Minnow right over it, and I'm going to jig it right up to it. Because if I got too close, if there's a bass in there, it would spook them, or a crappie. But if I just twitch this close, it won't scare them so easily, and we might have a chance at hooking up. And we did, just like that. Now they're crappie, see? See what happened? I saw this branch laying in here. This is a real dark crappie. Get him unhooked. I saw this branch laying in here and I didn't want to get too close. I didn't walk right up to it. I stood back on the shore and cast. I have my little Berkley Power Minnow. Get him unhooked and back in the water. I have my little Berkley Power Minnow, and because it's so light, I can almost twitch it in place. So I cast out past the stick. I don't want to cast right on the stick because the splash might spook them. So I cast out past it. I let it sink a few inches. I just lightly twitch it, and then I try to bring it up close to the end of the stick again. So what I'm trying to do is just twitch it, make it look alive, and bring it right by there. Now we may not get another one out of here. A lot of times a spot like, oh, we did get another one out of there. I was going to say a lot of times a spot like that will only, oh, got that, another crappie. A lot of times a spot like this on a small pond like that won't have more than 1 or 2 fish, but we'll keep trying as long as you're getting bit. And the nice thing, I'm using an artificial, so I don't have to rebait. I just have a little Berkley 3-inch power minnow, a 2-inch power minnow on here, I mean. And it's so lifelike, it looks so real. We'll give you a good close-up of these so you can see them. But they're so lifelike. And I just twitch it and then just kind of let it sit there and twitch it. And a couple things are happening because it's springtime. We're in the middle of May to a second half of May. And then we go another, oh, missed them. And so what's happening, those crappies are spawning around the brush they can find like this. And we're getting bit for a couple reasons. One, they love to eat minnows. Crappies do. And second is that this little minnow's invading their nest where they're trying to spawn. I tell you what, we got some weather coming up. I'm gonna move around, see what happens with this weather. Don't want to push my luck here. But I talked about getting out in waders and casting back to shore. Let me take you to a scene where we did that on another lake in the Fort Collins area called Dixon Lake, where I actually waded out to areas where you couldn't cast from shore, where it was allowed, cast back and got some bass. We'll take you out there. There's one. There we go. Picked one up on a little crack. I was just gonna go switch to a soft plastic because I like fishing soft plastics in this, but I threw this little crankbait in there one more time. He's actually hooked on the side because he swiped at it and missed it, and you'll see that happen a lot. And we're letting him go anyway.
It's a nice little largemouth though.
Yeah, and he tried to put the treble hook in me. We're not gonna let him do that. And
Well, I thought that last cast that you had was just about in the right spot. I was thinking to myself, if you don't pick up a fish there, then something's wrong.
You know, and this is what we're just out here having fun. And you're not gonna see huge fish out here. Now, some of these ponds, although will produce, this is actually a small lake. I don't know where it stops being a pond and starts being a small lake, but I guess we decided, the three of us today, that this was a small lake. But
It's definitely safe to say that this is a small lake here. You know, it's over 20 acres, so I would definitely consider that a small lake.
And you know, we don't expect to catch a lot of big fish. We're just gonna have some fun.
There are quite a few fish in here, but they're just of a slightly smaller size.
But you know, a lot of these ponds and small waters will produce big fish. I mean, it's amazing how many big fish are caught from ponds and small lakes. Now, there may not be a whole lot of them in here, but you know, you always want to have in the back of mind, you're out having fun, that maybe you're going to catch a lot of 8, 10, 12-inch fish and just have fun. But at any time, you might get that 3-pounder or 4-pounder.
Yeah, the next cast would be the big one.
Yeah, and you know, some fish as big as 7 or 8 pounds have come out of ponds and lakes like these.
Yeah, just right here in the Fort Collins area.
Got one on a little plastic worm. You know, oh, I'm gonna lose him in that bush. I'm gonna have to go get him out of that bush. There was so much weeds, I was throwing a little crankbait, I was getting hung up, and I kept getting frustrated with the amount of weeds on the hook, so I went to a little plastic worm that I could throw back into the ends of these pockets. Another, probably smaller than the other ones even. Get the hook out of them here. Wrap me up in a tree. Oh, you wrapped me up in somebody else's fishing line. Just another little largemouth, what we expect to catch here. Caught a bass right away on the little crankbait, but it was just, there's been an algae growth, which is common in these ponds.
Absolutely.
I slip it through there, and I don't really Texas rig it as bury it, but I just bury the tip of the hook, because these little fish aren't going to get much of a bite. But I can throw that back into that moss and wiggle it around and get bit. And I actually took this 4-inch curly-tailed plastic worm and broke about an inch off because the fish are so small, making a more tempting morsel. So I love fishing plastics. That's kind of my forte, and it just got me into a spot I couldn't have got with the crankbait. This is important too, folks. When you see this, there's a bobber and line. Now, somebody didn't do this on purpose. Somebody was fishing from shore, they got hung up and broke off, and that's going to happen. Whenever you're in a place where you can get monofilament out of the way, it can get tangled in animals, it can hurt the environment, you need to get it out. And if you're ever breaking off your line or cutting off your line, put it in your pocket and take it home.
It's important to protect the environment, and especially birds will get nested up, and all kinds of bad things can happen as far as nests and birds.
There we go. There we go. Working this habitat here, and there's a deep little channel that runs through here, and it looked just perfect, but all the way up nothing. So I went, and because the water's probably a little warmer this time of the day in the back end of that channel, I thought if there's going to be one here, it's going to be in the back end of that little channel. So I threw right to the back, and sure enough, got bit right away. Another little 8, 10, 12-inch bass on a plastic worm. But we're just, I tell you what, it's a middle of the weekday. We're out having a good time, just enjoying life, and close to home. 10-minute drive from the house, and wherever you live that you're seeing this show, I'll bet if you look around, there's a pond like this right next to you, and somewhere close to the town you live in, that's got bass and panfish in it, or that's stocked with trout, and that you can go out and do the same kind of thing. Yeah, got him. Another one stacked up. I knew that if I kept moving, I just spooked 3 bass and 4 bluegills out of the back of this channel fighting this fish. So I don't know how many more I'll be able to get out of here now, but I just kept moving further back. On the first one I caught, I didn't cast all the way to the back because I thought there might be some in there deeper. I worked my way back in. Got in a little deeper, got another one. Now, as you can see, these fish aren't going to be on anybody's trophy case, but I'll tell you what, here we are in April in a little pond 10 minutes from home, catching fish, middle of the day. Didn't come out here till 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'll be home in time for dinner and just have a great time and a lot of fun. And there's just no reason you can't get out and enjoy this. And I tell you what, if you got a kid you want to take fishing, what a way to teach them.